Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, also known as Liaozhai Ji or The Tales of Ghosts and Foxes, is a collection of short stories by the Chinese writer Pu Songling, written during the Qing Dynasty. The book contains nearly 500 stories covering a wide range of themes, but predominantly focusing on fox spirits, ghosts, and supernatural beings. These tales reflect the social landscape of 17th century China. Pu Songling, 1640 to 1715, courtesy name Luxian and also known as Jianshen, was a scholar from the Sichuan region of Jinan. He was widely respected as Master Liaozhai and called himself Yishi Shi, the historian of the strange. The Liaozhai stories are vividly illustrated in a set of colored picture books known as the Liaozhai Quantu. The full set consists of around 90 volumes scattered across the world. In this video, we'll explore 3 stories from the 31st volume of this set, which is held in collections from the Austrian National Library and the Martin Bodmer Foundation in Switzerland. These stories are believed to have been illustrated during the late Qing Dynasty in the Guangxu period. Let's dive into these 3 captivating tales, the sequel to the Yellow Millet Dream, the Little Hunting Dog, and Lady Xin the 14th. The Illusion of Power and the Yellow Millet Dream. In Fujian, there was a scholar surnamed Zeng, who, after passing the imperial examination along with several others, went to the outskirts of the capital for a leisurely outing. While there, they heard about a fortune teller at a local Buddhist temple and decided to have their fortunes told. The fortune teller, upon seeing Zeng's confident demeanor, told him that he would become a prime minister during a 20-year reign of peace. Overjoyed, Zeng was delighted by this prediction. At that moment, it began to drizzle outside, and the group sought shelter in the monks' quarters. Zeng lay down to rest on a bed, unaware that he would soon fall into a strange dream. In the dream, Zeng was summoned by the emperor, who bestowed upon him a ceremonial robe adorned with a python design, a jade belt, and a fine horse. From that point on, he ascended to the heights of power, basking in wealth and influence. He resided in a luxurious mansion, lavishly decorated, with high-ranking officials visiting daily to pay their respects. His life was filled with extravagant pleasures, surrounded by singing, dancing, and the attentions of many maidservants. However, as time went on, Zeng grew increasingly arrogant and corrupt. He abused his power, indulged in pleasure, and even showed no mercy to those who had once helped him. The power he enjoyed was not without consequences. One day, the officials could no longer tolerate Zeng's overbearing arrogance and filed complaints against him to the emperor. Eventually, the emperor ordered his house to be seized, and Zeng was exiled. On his journey into exile, Zeng was attacked by bandits and eventually found himself taken to the underworld. There, the king of hell was enraged by Zeng's misdeeds and sentenced him to climb mountains of knives and be boiled in cauldrons of oil, subjecting him to endless torment. Zeng begged for mercy, but was never granted forgiveness. The king of hell then ordered Zeng to be reborn as the daughter of a beggar in Guangxu, condemning him to a life of extreme poverty. As the beggar's daughter, she followed her parents, begging on the streets and enduring endless humiliation. Eventually, she was sold as a concubine to a scholar named Gu. Though her material needs were met, her days were filled with the harsh abuse of Gu's wife. One day, a local thug attempted to assault her, and she resisted fiercely. However, she was wrongfully accused of adultery and sentenced to execution. As she was about to face her death, she cried out for justice in despair. Suddenly, Zeng awoke with a start, finding himself still in the monks' quarters. It turned out that everything had been nothing more than a fleeting dream. Zeng was deeply shaken and sought the advice of the old monk. The monk counseled him to cultivate virtue and to practice good deeds. From that day on, Zeng abandoned his pursuit of power and wealth, choosing instead to retreat into the mountains, where he disappeared from the world without a trace. This story, through Zeng's vivid dream, reveals the greed and moral decay of human nature and reminds the reader to cultivate virtue and avoid being blinded by the illusory allure of power and wealth. Life is but a dream, and one should not lose oneself over momentary gains or losses. The Little Hound. A scholar yearning for peace and solitude moved into an ancient temple. However, The temple was plagued by mosquitoes, fleas, and bed bugs, leaving him restless and unable to sleep each night. One evening, as he lay down to rest, he suddenly saw something extraordinary. A tiny warrior no taller than 2 inches, his head adorned with pheasant feathers, riding a horse the size of a grasshopper. Perched on his arm was a falcon no larger than a common housefly. The scholar stared in disbelief as yet another tiny figure appeared, leading a hound the size of an ant into the room. Before long, hundreds of these miniature figures flooded into the room, each accompanied by hawks and hounds, ready for battle. What followed was a fierce and otherworldly clash between these tiny hunters and the swarms of mosquitoes and bedbugs. The room filled with an eerie atmosphere. The hum of the insects and the barking of the little hounds echoed like some strange, nightmarish symphony. Within moments, the floor was littered with the corpses of the defeated insects. As the battle ended, a figure resembling a tiny king dismounted his horse, gathered the spoils of war, and led his people back into the shadows of the night. The scholar, left in stunned silence, could hardly believe what he had just witnessed. His mind swirled with questions. Where had these little people come from? What sort of magic or dream had he stumbled into? Just then, the scholar noticed that one of the tiny hounds had been left behind. Fascinated, he carefully picked it up and placed it inside a small box, observing the tiny creature closely. He tried feeding it grains of rice, but the little hound had no interest in food. Instead, it began to sniff around the seams of his clothes and the cracks in his bed, where it eagerly devoured fleas. After eating its fill, the little hound returned to the box on its own. The scholar grew fond of the creature, keeping it as a pet and caring for it delicately. One day, while taking a nap, the scholar accidentally rolled over and crushed the tiny hound beneath him. When he awoke and discovered the hound's body flattened like a piece of paper, his heart was filled with sorrow and guilt. He had lost his secret companion. Yet, from that day on, the scholar's room was free of the pests that had once tormented him. No longer were mosquitoes or fleas a source of misery. The air was fresh and the room felt clean and peaceful. This story, with its eerie blend of the fantastical and the terrifying, paints a picture of the ancient desire for harmony and peace in daily life, as well as the frustration of being plagued by relentless insects. In this fairy tale-like world, the little hound was not only a fierce protector against pests, but also a tiny miracle, a secret ally to the scholar in his solitary life. Lady Xin the 14th. In the town of Guangxu, there lived a young man named Feng, notorious for his carefree and reckless behavior. One day, while out on a stroll, he crossed paths with a beautiful maiden. Later that evening, slightly drunk, he found himself wandering into an abandoned temple, and to his surprise, he saw the same maiden again. Intrigued, Feng entered the temple, where he met an old man with snow-white hair, who introduced himself as Shin. Fueled by curiosity and intoxication, Feng boldly declared his desire to marry the girl he had seen. The old man, with a cryptic smile, said he would need to consult his wife, hinting at some hidden matter. But Feng persisted. The old man finally revealed that he had 19 daughters, though only a few were yet unmarried. Feng, still determined, insisted on marrying the maiden he had met that morning. Drunk and brazen, Feng stumbled into the inner chambers of the temple, where he found the girl dressed in a red robe. His intrusion startled the entire household, and the old man angrily threw Feng out. Lost in the dark wilderness, Feng wandered until he spotted a light in the distance. Thinking he had found a village, he knocked on the door of a grand estate and was greeted by a wealthy old lady who welcomed him in. The lady, calling him her grandnephew, seemed eager to help him in his quest for marriage. Feng described the girl he had seen, and the old lady recognized her. She sent for a maid to fetch the girl. Soon enough, the red-clad maiden named Xin Shixi Niang, Lady Xin the 14th, was brought before them. The old lady offered to arrange the marriage, but the maiden insisted she must first consult her parents. Understanding, the old lady sent the girl back home and promised to select an auspicious day for the wedding. The next morning, when Feng awoke, the grand estate had vanished without a trace. He realized he had encountered spirits, yet he remained excited about his impending marriage. On the chosen night, a bridal sedan arrived, and Lady Xin entered his home, bringing with her an enormous jar filled with treasure. She explained that the minister Shui, who had long since passed, had become a powerful ghost ruler, and all the spirits and foxes within 100 miles were now under his command. Feng honored the old lady as his benefactor, and his life gradually settled into a comfortable routine. However, news of Feng's unusual marriage reached a local nobleman, Mr. Chu, who grew jealous of Feng's fortune in marrying a fox spirit. Consumed with envy, Chu plotted to ruin Feng. He orchestrated a scheme, getting Feng drunk and framing him for murder. Feng was arrested, and despite Lady Xin's tearful attempts to support him, sending money to cover his legal costs, Feng faced brutal interrogations and torture. Lady Xin urged him to confess, fearing he would otherwise suffer even worse. Reluctantly, Feng admitted guilt to a crime he did not commit, and he was sentenced to execution by strangulation. As the day of his execution approached, Lady Xin's loyal fox maid returned with unexpected news. Mr. Chu had been stripped of his official position, and Feng's case was to be reopened. To Feng's surprise, he was soon acquitted and freed. Grateful but puzzled, he couldn't fathom how his case had reached the emperor's ears. The truth came out later. Lady Xin's maid had disguised herself as a courtesan and had personally delivered a petition to the emperor pleading for justice. The emperor, moved by her story, ordered the case to be re-examined, saving Feng from his tragic fate. Feng returned home, eager to reunite with Lady Xin. But she had grown weary of the mortal world. She longed to part ways with him, feeling suffocated by the life of a human wife. Feng begged her to stay, and though she remained for a time, Lady Xin's strength began to fade. She aged rapidly, and eventually she passed away. With silver gifted by the emperor, Feng buried her with great honor. Years later, one of Feng's servants claimed to have seen Lady Xin again on Mount Taihua, where she had ascended to immortality. From then on, Feng lived a prosperous and peaceful life, blessed by the lingering magic of his extraordinary bride. This eerie tale blends love and loss, jealousy and justice, capturing the strange and supernatural bond between a mortal man and a fox spirit. Lady Xin, once a symbol of power and mystery, leaves behind an ethereal presence, reminding Feng of the fleeting nature of their strange and ghostly love. That wraps up the stories from the 31st volume. Thank you to all our friends for tuning in and enjoying these ancient tales with us. This is Eastern Brush, Western Soul.